Good morning. My Twitter name is Marietje D66, and D66 stands for Democrat 66, which was established as a democratic reform party in the year 1966. What kind of a year was that? It was the year in which President Johnson signed the Freedom of Information Act. It was the year of the Vietnam War, and it was a year in which military coups took place in no less than 7 countries. It was also in the middle of the Cold War, in which the world seemed conveniently divided between the free world and the oppressed rest of the world. And when we look at the discussions or listen to the rhetoric around the internet freedom debate, it almost seems as though the world is still divided between the free world and repressive regimes, which use technologies to oppress people and who we have to convince that they should be more respectful of internet freedom. But I am very cautious to say that we actually represent the free world in this respect. I think we don't have our own house in order in Europe and in the United States these days, and it really compromises our credibility to speak to internet freedom in the rest of the world. There's a constant compromise, it's been mentioned by some of the previous speakers, between economic benefits and people's fundamental rights and freedoms. I'm going to go through a small selection because to go over everything would be way too much. There are now deep packet inspections into people's information and exchanges of communication to effectively enforce the breaching of net neutrality. There is an increased push for intermediary liability, and lawful interception can easily be invoked when you are a football player in the UK and you don't want people to know who you've had an affair with. There's a growing list or a slippery slope of what is considered undesired content, which started with child pornography, terrorism, hate speech, and now includes intellectual property rights enforcement. And without much judicial oversight, internet service providers are required to monitor what their users do and even block or intervene themselves without a judge interfering. Last week, at the EG8, the French President Sarkozy made a call for more regulation of the internet. Well, the last time we heard about regulation of France, it was in the form of the infamous 3 strikes laws. And the French European Commissioner came out with an intellectual property rights enforcement directive last week, in which the most used words were enforcement and protection. We are lacking a balance in the discussion about cybersecurity, including internet freedom, and we risk repeating the war on terror all over again. While some companies make a plea for the free flow of information as a trade barrier, the accountability and transparency of their own flows of information are unknown to the politicians who are supposed to help them acquire the free flow of information as a trade barrier. And the examples go on. Mika noted the responses to WikiLeaks in the United States, which are troubling, etc., etc. Now, D66, my political party, has voted in the party convention for having internet freedom as a fundamental right of people. In last week's report by the special representative of the UN, this was actually enforced, and there's an increasing amount of voices sharing that opinion, and I'm very happy about that. We need to reverse economy over rights, include more accountability, transparency, in order to be credible to our own citizens, but also credible players in the world. And that world is in a bit of a paradox, because we make laws on the basis of a nation state, but we live in a globally connected environment. And the speed with which technologies develop are in no way met with the speed with which laws are being passed. The conquering of the online territory does not overlap with the territories of the nation state. And to highlight this complexity and what we might be able to do in situations like this, I want to focus on the case of Egypt, but not without complimenting the Egyptian people for defying fear, violence, death, to go into the streets and to speak up for freedom and their rights. I also want to thank Andrew and Mika for having so much attention during PdF 11 for North Africa and the Middle East. I think these are crucial times, and I think that's great that you're doing that. Now, it was a people's revolution, a people's uprising. We can't underline that enough, but technology did play a role. It helped to organize, mobilize, it helped people express themselves, and it also helped in documenting human rights violations and sharing those with the rest of the world. And Mubarak understood this. His government understood this. So this is what happened. While Egypt was in the dark, Western companies were also forced to shut down their services at the orders of the government. And Vodafone, a UK incorporated company, was a 54% shareholder of Vodafone Egypt, said the following. They were ordered to shut down services and were expecting the Egyptian authorities to clarify the situation in due course. While no Egyptian could use mobile internet and communications, they received messages like this, which translate into this. Effectively, they had become state media. I've asked for an EU inquiry into the situation that EU ICT and telecom companies found themselves in, but High Representative Catherine Ashton has not yet answered my letter. Last week, Egypt had its own process of accountability, which is very wonderful. A total of $90 million was in place in fines for 3 former ministers. And while that is wonderful, it only focused on the economic losses and not on the human rights violations. And I think that that's a tremendous missed opportunity. Egyptian people think so too. They started a site called IHateVodafoneEgypt.com. And I think we'll see much more of this consumer activism, which can indeed cross borders and encourage politicians to take action. Of course, we've heard of the Global Network Initiative, where corporations decide to have a code of conduct, but governments also have a responsibility. We must practice what we preach. And I'm not talking about over-regulating, I'm talking about simply taking our core responsibility of defending people's fundamental rights and freedoms. Some actions that I think we can take. We can ensure access to the internet is a fundamental right in more places in the world. It becomes the mainstream. And when we impose weapon embargoes in countries where we think that the government will do nothing else but kill people with the weapons that we may provide them, we should think about which ICT products should be included, because some of these products can hurt human rights all the same. It should simply be mainstreamed in packages of weapon embargoes so that we don't have to discuss these separately over and over again. There may also be trade restrictions with certain countries, of which it's considered a punishment, and we should see what role the so-called dual-use technologies play in this, and perhaps reevaluate this role in a continuous basis, because as new technologies develop, they may have different implications for human rights in different places in the world and in the hands of different players. In the EU, we do human rights impact assessments before we agree to trade circumstances, preferred trade circumstances with third countries. I think we should do human rights impact assessments on ICT in the R&D phase, so that we can already be ahead of the curve in thinking about how human rights might be affected instead of running behind all the time. And we should also look at monitoring what happens in different places where ICT and telecom products that come from Europe actually land and how they play out in the real world. This monitoring, this assessing on the basis of human rights is not developed sufficiently yet. And we must also separate populations from governments and encourage them to use those tools that may help them exercise their fundamental human rights. But what's fundamentally important in all these decisions, whether it's empowering individuals, consumers, people in the West or in other places, is knowledge. And I would like to invite all of you to really help build a knowledge base on the part of decision makers, because lobby is very strong and it's very difficult for people to make well-informed decisions in this difficult environment, but I think it must be the basis of all of our work, and I'm sure you can help with that. I've started a working group in the European Parliament that brings together this knowledge between NGOs, other stakeholders, civil society, companies and decision makers to ensure that there is more transparency and accountability. It's not about technology, but it's about the people. And the internet has changed many things, but let's not get stuck into all the technical parts, but keep in mind that the fundamental rights of people have not changed. And your government is responsible for safeguarding that, and you can hold us accountable for that.